go. Alright, sorry about that. Welcome back to the channel, guys. My name is Fiore. Today I'm just going to be doing a short video on how to make hi-hats from scratch for your drum kits. Now I'm going to show you many different ways of going about this. Really, it's up to you to find whatever fits best for your workflow or budget. I'll show you some free ways to do it, and I'll show you some paid for VSTs that really make the job easier. That being said, I don't want to make these intros too long, so I'm going to just keep it simple and we're going to jump right into it. Alright, so I've hopped into FL Studio. I'm just going to kind of go down the list of various ways that you can make these hi-hats. So I'll leave timestamps in the video itself. If you would like to skip to one part or the other or just reference back, you should be able to do that pretty easily now. And without anything else to say, let me go ahead and show you how to do it in a sampler. So with the sampler, the first thing that you can do is load white noise. Now you can find samples of white noise all over the internet. There's even packs of it. I think there's one on Music Radar that's pretty good. But for a basic white noise, if you want, you can just take any old sound. Doesn't matter what it is. Let's just say a kick. Throw it into Edison, right click, tools, generate noise. It's going to make a noise file. Now, typically I'd hit Alt A and reduce the amplitude of this noise a bit because it comes in a little hot. And we're just going to throw that in our sampler. Now, we're going to go over to our sampler and we're just going to adjust the volume envelope, right? So most of what we're going to do is in the post-processing, but for now, we're going to take this, we're going to turn the decay pretty far down, sustain all the way down, release all the way down, hold all the way down. And you can play with these a bit, right? So with the decay down, I'm going to go ahead and adjust its tension. Right about there's fine. On its own, it sounds okay, right? And don't forget, this is a sampled noise, so if you play different notes on your keyboard, like C6 versus C5 versus C4, you're going to get different tones. So coming back over here, we can go to the pre-computed effects, and we can play with some of those just to get a resonance and a filter. So we can turn our resonance up and start a cut. Right, we can play with this ring modulation. Okay, but don't go too crazy here. We're really going to take action on this is with effects. So coming over here, first thing we'll do, maybe just throw an EQ on. Whatever EQ you want. I just use this one because this is what most people have. All right. The temptation would be to really boost the highs, but in context with a beat, it's not the greatest. And one of the things you can actually do when designing sounds that have sharp transients or are just kind of short and you're just constantly hitting a key is give them some context in a beat. And as you're designing them, mix them to that beat. Just don't use the same beat for every sound. So on its own right there, it's not quite where I want it for a hat. So one of the things I do often is throw a bit crusher on. You can use Camel Crusher, you can use several, but Decimort 2 from D16 is a personal favorite. I'm just going to go to a vintage sampler preset, play with any of them. Honestly, there are a lot that are good. I'm going to play with this one. And off the bat, it has a low pass filter on, so we're going to change that to a high pass filter. I'm going to change the cutoff, raise the resonance, and then bring that cutoff back down until we hit that sort of metallic sound we're looking for. Now, if it's a little bit too high-end heavy, we can lower this resampler rate. And now we're getting somewhere. You might want to add a soft clipper on. Okay, so that's sampler. For the next one, I'm just going to take a Foley sample. I'm going to load that into the sampler. I'm going to find a part of it that I think could be a hi-hat. Something with a sharp transient that's already in the higher register. And you could use low sounds. You could even make a hi-hat from a kick. As long as you shorten the envelope, you raise its pitch enough, and you process it correctly. But we'll start with this one. I'm playing the sample on C6. Here's its root note, right? So playing it on C6, I've assigned it to a mixer, and you can play with the pre-computed effects or envelopes in the sampler, but for this one, we're just going to go straight to the mixer. I've loaded this chain here, and this is currently bypassed. This is a pitch shifter, a tape saturator with a flanger, a bit crusher, a parallel compressor, transient shaper, and a limiter. Now what we're going to do is go ahead and turn that on. And you can hear it kind of has a nice little crunch. It's a different sort of context. Now I've saved probably 15 or so presets like this that are different varieties of VSTs and chains to apply to Foley sounds to make hi-hats quickly. And that's one way you can get like a really unique sounding hi-hat that may not always be what people go towards, but might fit a particular beat like really well, or are just great as percussion elements on their own, especially when you pitch them back down. So that's one way of doing it. Now I'm going to go ahead and move on to Sytrus. Okay, so for Sytrus, it's very similar to the clap design that we did in the last video. We're just going to turn this noise up on the first operator, start with the default preset. We're going to go over to the volume envelope. Right, just start with something like that. Let's go to the first filter. I'm going to turn this output down. First filter on. And let's just do like a high pass or something. Right there is an actually decent hi-hat. And we could stop there, but we're not going to. We're going to take that into our mixer here and just play with some options. So one thing I like to do sometimes when I want to get creative with the hi-hats is actually throw them into a convolution. So for this one, I'm going to open Isotope Trash 2. This is a multi-effects plugin that has distortion, filtering, compression, delay, all of these different options. But the one I'm going to use right now is actually just the distortion and the convolution. So we'll get to the convolution in a moment. We're going to turn it off for now. We're just going to go over here to saturate, do some tape saturation. And I'm now going to go over to the convolution, and we're going to just load an impulse response to kind of imbue the characteristics of another space or sound with our original sample. So I'll show you what I mean. You can go to tone and just choose anything. Some are going to sound nothing like what we want. Some are going to sound eerily similar to a real sort of live hi-hat, or just have a different characteristic altogether. So for example, this one's not going to sound very good, right? But this one gives it a nice feel. So if we take this down, that's without, that's with it. You have two different sounding hi-hats with one go. So we can take that and we can export just like that. Okay, so now for Serum. Serum is, again, going to be very similar to Sytrus, but you have a few other options. In Serum, on an initial patch, you can turn off the first oscillator, turn on the noise, enable one-shot mode, and just like in Sytrus, or your sampler, play with this ADSR. And the most important thing in Serum to know is once you have this ADSR kind of set where you want, you can come back to it, is you can upload and add your own noise samples. You can use the ones that are in here, white noise, whatever works. But this is kind of your one-shot sampler within Serum. You can add a lot of options to it. It doesn't, I don't think, do like time stretch or things like that, but for the sake of sound design, it's very useful because you can bring them into Serum to design further. So here's a list of noise samples from Music Radar that I downloaded. I'm just going to grab this Juno noise. We can go ahead and play with the pitch and the level. We can go ahead and zoom in on this envelope here. We need to shorten it a bit. You bring the attack out slightly. All right, and just like Sytrus, we don't want to play too much with this initial portion. You can raise the pitch up and get you a little closer. Really where the magic happens is in the filtering. So we're going to go ahead and add a filter to the noise. You can do, say, this one right here. I'm going to bring that cutoff up, that resonance up, that drive. right? So we can play with that there. We can go from there and just add some effects, run it through the mixer presets, whatever. You know, whatever you did before, you can play some more with this. You can run through different filtering. And you can just swap through different noise, right? So once you get some that you like, you can save them as presets, you know, whatever you want to do. And that's just going to give you guys a lot of freedom once you've got something that kind of sounds good to start swapping things in and out. And that's how you get 5 or 10 hats from one quick session. You do the work in the beginning, you save the preset, and then you start swapping things out until you get different characteristics or sounds that are justifiable to export as their own sound. All right, so apart from using white noise in your sampler or synthesizing hi-hats and running them through mixer chains, there are dedicated VSTs. This one from Audiothing called Hats is the same makers as the hand clapper one that I showed in my last video. And it's really great for just generating multiple hi-hat samples. You have a noise oscillator that you can create hi-hats from pure scratch. You have a sampler where you can drag in or use samples included. And then you have all of these different parameters that are going to allow you to actually adjust and manipulate the hat, right? There's the filter, the reverb, the bit crusher, a ring modulator, and all of these things are modular. So you can actually move these around and change the order of the processing. You can even design open hats in this VST. So it's very useful. For this one, we're just going to make a hi-hat real quick in the closed hi-hat range, which is C4, right? If you hit C5, it plays an open hat. So we just have this initialized sample, and you'll notice some of these have the lock icon. That's because this also has the randomizing feature that the hand clapper has. So I'm just going to start with this noise. We're just going to get it somewhere usable, right? Turn off this ring mod for now. Or let's go ahead and add in one of these samples here. See, now we're getting somewhere. So you just watch this attack, you know, keep it short. You can go all the way, but usually 4 milliseconds is good for a hi-hat. Just add this gain back in. And right there, we're pretty much set up with a hi-hat. Now you could take this, you could swap this through different samples. You can drag in your own samples. All right, here's the original. Here's what we're working with. Lower that filter cutoff. You could add the ring modulation. You could throw in some reverb on a very low, wet, small room size, just to give it that realism. Right? Lots you can do here. You can throw a bit crusher in before the filter. So this is a great plugin for designing hi-hats. I highly recommend it. It's a lot cheaper than something like Serum, but again, this is all it does. So it's really up to you. If you're someone who's making a lot of kits, I recommend it. If you're just exploring sound design and you just want to do this for fun, you don't really need it, but it is something that is useful. All right, so that was Audiothing hats. Now I'm going to show you guys something that I just decided on a whim to make the other day inside of FL Studio. So it is for FL Studio users, unless you've figured out a way to open FL plugins in other DAWs, as I have seen some people do. Don't ask me how. What this is actually a patcher preset that I made that combines several synthesizers and post-processing effects into one plugin with an interface, and it'll allow you to generate an infinite number of hi-hats. And I'm going to make a separate video on this plugin just to kind of show you guys how to really finesse it. The important things to take away is that it is free, that it is a little CPU intensive, so depending on your machine, it may not be worthwhile, but I will go ahead and leave a link for it in the description below. And now I'm just going to show you guys real briefly how you can kind of finesse it to, again, generate just lots of hi-hats, whether you're using them as source sounds or finished products in your kits. So check it out. In the center here, we have this matrix, which will allow you to change the source sound or a blend of the source sounds. You have this tone bar, which will allow you to change the tone, right? You can adjust the volume if you need to. I have it kind of set to gain stage, so as you add effects, you can add gain back in. you have this matrix of different effects like distortion, filtering, right? You have this lo-fi, which kind of adds some crunch and body to it, right? Blend into taste. You have a reverb, so you can add some realism as needed. And a metalizer, right? And you can just play with these. This is an input gain into a limiter, so it's not gonna do much, but it will saturate the signal. You have your output from the compressor. So if you guys would like a video on how to customize this so that you could change the source hi-hat samples, you know, play with the effects and swap up the chain and the order of things, I'm going to go ahead and make one. It didn't take me long, maybe a few hours one day just to throw this together, and it's now something that I can swap out instruments in, whether it's Serum or Sytrus or whatever, and generate new hi-hats. And I think it would actually be interesting to make several of these for FL users for various different types of sounds, whether it's kicks or snares, whatever it is. So if you like this, if you download it and you get some good use out of it, or you find some issues with it, you know, let me know in the comments or just DM me, and I'd be happy to work it out or look into some further designs for future sounds. Thank you for joining me today. If this was helpful to you, if you enjoyed this sort of tutorial, go ahead and drop a like on the video and leave me a comment below if you have any questions or concerns, or feel free to just DM me or email me, whichever works for you. I appreciate you guys being here. Until next time, peace.